Okay, I will call this meeting to order now, the Township Joint Board of Management at 2 p.m. on April 15th. And we'll start with the territorial acknowledgement. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge with respect the history and living culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. We recognize that these lands are the territories of the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, collectively known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the keepers of this land. Georgian Bluffs is located on lands encompassed by treaties 45.5, 67, 72, 82, and 93. We reflect on our role as treaty people and the need to live in respect and peace and show respect to the First Peoples who inhabit these lands and waters. And moving on, are there any urgent additions to the agenda today? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover and seconder, Shirley and Grant, and the recommendation is that the agenda be approved as presented. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Does any member wish to declare a pecuniary interest? Seeing none, you may declare at any time if one should arise throughout the meeting. Minutes of previous meetings, the recommendation is that the minutes of the Inter-Township Joint Board of Management meeting held on January 14th, 2025 be adopted. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Will and Rick, and is there any discussion? I will call the vote then. All in favor? That's carried. We have no delegations today, but just for the public's information, any person who wishes to appear before the board regarding an item on the agenda must register with the clerk's office. To register, you can complete the online delegation form at www.georgianbluffs.ca/delegations or call the clerk's office at 519-376-2729 extension 601 or register in council chambers with the clerk prior to the meeting start time at 2 p.m. So we have no delegations and no presentations today. Correspondence. The recommendation is that the correspondence contained herein be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Shirley and Grant. And the item is 7.1 MNP 2024 Audit Service Plan Letter. Are there any questions or concerns with that? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Staff reports. From the Office of the CAO, recommendation is that the ITFD board receive report CAO 2025-015 for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Steve and Ron, and I'll turn to the CAO. Do you have any comments to make? Thanks.
So good afternoon to you, Chair Pelton, to members of the board. Thank you ever so much. I will keep my comments very brief on this one. So as discussed through the budget process for 2025, we do need to do some work on the washrooms at the ITFD Fire Hall. We are doing work as the Township of Georgian Bluffs on some washrooms, and so we put a tender out earlier on this year for design, project management, contract administrative support for that. Received a number of bids on that and have awarded it. It is work which falls within the purchasing limits, and so this is a for information report. We haven't actually started that work, pending for today's conversation, but this is on the lines of engaging somebody to help us through with the design work, both the layout, the mechanical layout, the plumbing layout, the electrical layout, so on and so forth. They would also then help us through the tendering process. It would be tendered for construction, and that would come back for award. And they will help with the contract administration, making sure that whoever ends up getting the tender actually does what they're supposed to be doing and builds what we would like them to build. They did all the vendors that put in for the tender did attend a mandatory site visit, and so they have had a good wander around the fire hall and know what they're dealing with. So delighted to be recommending we move forward with Alamo Architecture Inc. As I say, we have got them working on township work at this point in time, and so far I've been very happy with what we've seen from them. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Shirley and then Steve.
Thank you very much, Chair Carlton. And just a quick one, if I may. I'm just curious to know at this very early stage, and they may not have had a chance to look at this, but does the firm feel that $100,000 will be adequate budget-wise to go forward and undertake the construction that's been identified?
So I think through you, Chair Carlton, I think it's probably a little early to say that. There's varying different scopes, and certainly when we went through the fire hall, all the proponents did indicate that the existing floor print of the washrooms is somewhat constrained and would limit. We looked at the basement, and that's the primary location for an alternative for a shower and washroom facility. We did also actually look inside the fire hall in an underutilized space where there was some opportunity there. So my suspicion is that they will come up with a design which is in budget and probably one that's slightly beyond budget. But we will, I don't know those numbers at this point. Based on the work we're doing elsewhere, they do move quite quickly. So I would anticipate we should have some of those figures back for the next board meeting.
Thank you. Steve?
Thank you. Alamo, where are they from? And you're using them now and are quite happy?
Yes, so they're actually out from, they're not dead local.
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, north end of the GTA. I think we can, are you, Sam will get that. We are working with them on Shallow Lake. So in Shallow Lake, they're doing plans at the minute for interior renovations to the arena washrooms. They're also doing an accessible wash change facility, and they're doing renovations to the exterior washrooms and the ball diamond there. We've moved through the design process of that very quickly. They've been very responsive in meeting with staff. They were on site within 12 hours, more or less, of us phoning them up and saying, you've got the work. And they have turned around multiple iterations of the design and been very responsive to staff. So at this point, we're very happy. They just engaged, I think we had the mechanical consultant on site this morning. So they're just engaging the mechanical, plumbing, HVAC part of the design phase now. So we've got concept designs already from that work and moving forward to the detailed design stage right now.
Beautiful.
Sam? For you there, they started Bond.
Vaughn.
And if I may ask Chair Carlton, do they then attempt to use local contractors, or do they bring in their own people?
So through you, Chair Carlton, no, they would be tendering through our procurement processes. And we have asked that when we get to the tender point, that we will proactively reach out to local contractors to try and encourage them to bid. It is open for bids from across, but they're not signed up with a particular contractor to do the installation work. So it's just the contract management side of things, not anything to do with the contract under construction at this point.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, I will then call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is the RFP for building and facility assessment. So the recommendation is that the ITFD board award the ITFD elements of RFP 2024-04 Facilities Master Plan to McCollum Sather in the amount of $33,250, inclusive of taxes and 15% contingency. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Shirley and Rick? Any discussion, or is somebody speaking to this? Are you speaking to this? Go ahead.
So through Chair Carlton, similar to the last one, this was work which is identified and has been identified for a couple of years within the ITFD capital plan. And similarly to the previous report, the Township of Georgian Bluffs is doing work aligned with this on its own facilities this year. So we bundled this piece of work with the RFP that was sent out for the facilities master plan for the township. Not all the scope of work that we require as a township is required on the ITFD building. So we We pared down the work for the ITFD building to really focus on a facility condition analysis and 10-year capital plan with an overview of environment and climate change implications for that building. So it's a little bit less than we're doing with some of the township buildings. We did get the consultants to price this work out separately so that it can be awarded by the board. And because this has come in slightly over budget and it's beyond purchasing limits, I do need board direction to move forward. The tender went out. There was a non-mandatory site visit associated to this. Callum Slather are working with a number of sub-consultants on this one. They are the principal and they have 2 or 3 firms working with them in delivering all elements of the RFP that was requested. One of their sub-consultants did attend a non-mandatory site visit, and so they were able to see the building prior to putting the bid in. We received just 1 bid on closing for this body of work, although there was quite a lot of interest in advance, just 1 bid on closing. That bid was reviewed from a technical perspective and on satisfactory performance under the technical criteria. A pricing component was opened and reviewed by a panel and met our needs, fell within budget, the overall budget that we had for the project, and so we did recommend award. Township of Georgian Bluffs awarded the work to undertake the facilities master plan, which kicked off last week or the week before, just kicked off very recently with the initial meeting with the team that's undertaking the work. As I say, there's an element within that, which is the ITFD, which we haven't awarded at this point, pending this meeting, and the recommendation in front of you is to award that work. It has come in slightly beyond the budget that we had anticipated, and so what we're suggesting on doing is basically borrowing from the capital budget for next year. We'll adjust the forecast for next year to decrease the forecasted expense to offset the overage for this year. So we've got money in the reserve, it's just basically borrowing from next year to pay for this year. The work will consist of a full building condition assessment, so a full assessment of the ITFD fire hall. One of the key components that we know we're going to have some challenges with is the AODA compliance. We have a split level. In essence, you can't go anywhere without encountering stairs in the building, and so we need to understand the AODA compliance of the building, and we want to undertake a review of the functional health and safety elements of the building through the work. The second piece of the work, or a piece of that work factoring into the 10-year capital plan, will come from this. So there will be a building condition assessment that's done, and then there will be a 10-year capital plan, which will talk about what the building needs over the next 10 years. That will include oversight to some of the climate change objectives of both the Township of Georgian Bluffs and Meaford, looking towards what net zero could look like and whether indeed net zero is ever even achievable on that building site. What might be needed to the building envelope, how we can look at the systems within there to reducing the climate impact, the energy usage of the building, and so on and so forth. So as I say, slightly over budget on this one. There is no second option for this, and we have engaged them as a township at this point, so they're up and running, ready to go. And if the board is supportive of the recommendation in front, we'll reach out to the consultants tomorrow and get them started on this work as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. Next item is the Georgian Bluffs Fire Master Plan. Recommendation that the ITFD Board receive report CAO 2025-017 on a Georgian Bluffs Fire Master Plan for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Will and Ron, and back to you.
So through you, Chair Carlton, and this is the last time I'm up, I think, today. I'll hand the reins over to the Chief after this. But this is an update I wanted to provide to the board. Although this is work which the Township of Georgian Bluffs is doing, the Township of Georgian Bluffs relies on ITFD for most of its fire services across the township. And so whilst it is a plan being developed by the township, it has a very significant impact potentially on the relationship between the township and ITFD Fire Board. It's the exact same process that the town of Meaford went through back in 2018-19, I believe, and I believe it was approved in either 19 or early 20, your fire master plan. And we're going through both the community risk assessment and the fire master plan process. It's not the first time the township has done this. It was last done in 2011, as I referred to in the report. I wasn't able to track back and find a point at which the township actually adopted the recommendations from the 2011 plan, and through conversations with the chief, the deputy chief, and indeed just the reality of today, you can tell that many of those recommendations weren't implemented back in 2011. So in essence, we're starting from ground zero in terms of the fire master plan. The Fire Master Plan relies on community risk assessment, which is the first stage. The chief completed a community risk assessment for the Township of Georgian Bluffs in 2022 or thereabouts, I believe. Again, it wasn't recommended for approval at that point in time by the township, so we're going to be relying on that for the community risk assessment this time. The community risk assessment really looks at the building fabric and makeup of what the Township of Georgian Bluffs looks like, the sorts of buildings we have, whether we've got any high rises, which we don't, how many multiple unit dwellings we have, how many schools, how many churches, unique industry that might be in the township, things that might present more significant hazards or risks, such as gas stations or any chemical storage facilities that we might have across the township. It looks at those from a risk-based perspective in terms of our ability to be able to deal with those with the fire services we rely on. And as I say, the majority of the township relies on the services provided by ITFD. So the community risk assessment looks at those community-based risks and how well we are geared up to be able to respond to them. So it will look at the fire services we have in terms of their response time, the training, the equipment, and the personnel that we have within ITFD to be able to respond to those in a prompt manner and to mitigate or eliminate those hazards and to be able to deal with the risks should they come up. It will look at so that's the community risk assessment, sorry. The community risk assessment then feeds into a fire master plan. So the fire master plan takes the recommendations from the community risk assessment and really makes sure that we have a service which is built to respond to those risks. And so it then delves into a deeper dive in respect of the services that we have that provide services to the township. So we'll look at the services and facilities of ITFD. It will look at the mutual and automatic aid agreements we have with neighbouring municipalities, which include South Bruce Peninsula, Chatsworth, and Aaron Elderslie, as well as other organisations around us with whom we might have relationships. For example, we have a relationship for fire prevention services with Owen Sound. So the Fire Master Plan will look at the risks that we have, look at the range of resources we have at our disposal, and it will make recommendations as to how those two should line up. It will make recommendations around what service level the township should be expecting from its fire services in terms of response times. It will identify if there are areas of under provision or perhaps over provision, and it will explore alternative ways of working to help resolve things. So looking at where automatic aid, mutual aid agreements could be improved, enhanced, where there might be ones where we need an agreement that needs to be updated to reflect the realities of today. So the Fire Master Plan really is a 5 to 10 year plan, probably more like the between 5 and 10 rather than next year plan of what we as a township need to look at in terms of our fire service provision. The process is kicked off a few weeks ago. So we've had a number of update meetings. The chief, the deputy chief, both here and in South Bruce, have been busy collating information and providing information to the consultants to help inform that community risk assessment. And so that process has been going on for a few weeks. They will start doing some of their engagement work over the next few weeks. So is it next week? I think it's next week. Yep, next week. The consultants will be up and on site. They will be meeting with the chief, the deputy chief. They'll be meeting with the captains and the volunteers, and they'll be doing a presentation to Council of Georgian Bluffs around the process around the Fire Master Plan and community risk assessment. There is a community engagement as part of this as well, which we anticipate to roll out over the next few weeks. We're just working on the survey at this point in time that we'll be rolling out to the community, really to get a sense of community feedback around the fire services that we have across the township. So this is really an information report, because as I say, it is a Township of Georgian Bluffs piece of work, but it obviously has significant impact potentially on the work of ITFD board. We will bring a draft plan back and hope to have the consultants here to give some feedback and answer questions from the board as we go through this process, but wanted to provide you a very quick heads up as to the process that has been kicked off and what that will look like. We're working with the Lumex group in terms of doing this. They've done other neighbouring master plans. I don't believe they did the Meaford one, but they've actually just wrapped up doing the South Bruce one, so they do have some local familiarity and have already worked with some of the people they're working with just now. So far we've had a good few meetings with them, and as I say, there is a lot of information that has drifted back that way, and I take my hat off to the chief and the deputy chief for their support in gathering that all together. I'm more than happy to take any questions, but did want to provide this as a heads up at this point.
Thank you. Shirley, go ahead.
I have two questions with your permission,
Yes,
Chair
go ahead.
Carlton. The first one, if we come back to 2011, I'm just kind of curious if we know what happened, that we went to the effort of doing the fire master plan, but then it wasn't adopted by council and the recommendations weren't implemented. So I just want to make sure that if we go through this exercise again, that we will move forward and recognize the recommendations and go forward and take those actions.
So through you, Chair Carlton, that is almost word for word the question that was asked to me by the volunteers in the ITFD fire hall earlier this year when I did a presentation to them. That I can commit as a staff person, but ultimately it will be Council of Georgian Bluffs that will commit to that work, and that will be done through the process. There were a lot of odd things about the 2011 plan because we actually asked Inter-Township Fire Department to do that plan. And it's very difficult for Inter-Township Fire Department to write a plan, which is actually a plan that the municipality should have written at that time. So I'm not entirely sure of the history and the context of that plan, but my hope is, my anticipation is that we will write a plan which has recommendations which are meaningful and realistically possible. I hate plans with 3,000 recommendations when you know you're only likely to get the first 4 or 5 done. So we will focus on trying to develop a plan which is implementable from the outset, but one that Township of Georgian Bluffs is able to adopt and to provide the direction to move forward with the recommendations there within. I should reflect that we have looked at, and we are going to look at the Meaford plan, just to make sure that we don't ask ITFD through our plan to do something contrary to the Meaford Fire Master Plan. And the Meaford Fire Master Plan is a good hint as to where we can look for some of the recommendations. So we have provided that as part of the background information as well.
Thank you. If I may proceed with my second question. Thank you, Chair Carlton. On page 3, it suggests that any progress reporting on the Meaford Fire Master Plan has occurred, but if you've been unable to identify any actions in relation to that. And being very familiar, as Steve and I are, with that Fire Master Plan, and we know that there have been many recommendations. If I recall, I think there were 40 some, and I believe that several have been implemented. And I know that we have our new CIO, Sean Everett, with us, and our Director of HR and Community Services, Sarah Mahan, and I don't know whether they're prepared, or I don't want to put them on the spot to speak to that, or with your permission.
I can, through you, Chair Carlton, I'll issue something first, but I'd be more than happy to let Sarah or Mr. Everett respond to that one as well. So the report was issued while I had a request in to Sarah for the information. The report had to go into the queue before I got the response, but Sarah has now provided a response. She's given me a great update on the progress that was made. And so we have got that. We passed that on to the consultants, so I can see where the progress has been made. And we've got a good summary of which recommendations from the Meaford Master Plan were specific to ITFD, which ones were specific to Meaford, and which ones covered both agencies to some extent or another. So Sarah has been incredibly helpful since I've written the report. So my apologies, I didn't mean to point that one out. I don't know if you're
Mr. Everett has his hand up actually there, so maybe we'll go to him as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your indulgence. In speaking with Fire Chief Pilon, I'm happy to announce that I believe there was some total of 51 recommendations that were contained in the master plan. Chief Pilon has identified to me, he's giving me a spreadsheet, which I'm sure that we'd be happy to provide, where roughly 28 of the actions are actually completed. 10 additional are completed or to be completed in 2025. 5 have been deemed under the corporate strategy, 2 have been parked, and then there are a number of others that were done in 2021. So we're actually in really, really good shape, and I really appreciate the opportunity just to highlight that, you know, the fire master plan, significant amount of work has been completed. Just happy to be able to provide that information, and happy to be here today. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Everett. Any other comments or questions from the board? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the fire chief. Recommendation is that report ITFD-2025-02 be received for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Shirley and Rick, and I will turn to Jeff.
Through you, Chair Carlton, just a quick overview of this. I just want to really start off by thanking my volunteers and the board for the support. We can't achieve all these things without their support. So the calls were up a little bit last year. I think we're up 3%. Not a big change over the previous year, but a little bit of a change. And we've seen a bigger commitment on training. Some of our firefighters are very interested in updating some of the NFPA courses. We do have people in the pump ops courses the last couple of years, getting the new hires that didn't qualify under the exemptions. We're getting them all getting them up to speed, as well as the drivers that have come in and getting them, and they're just continuously really interested in doing some of the online stuff as well. There are courses through the fire college for bettering themselves, and we do have a lot of them that are starting to do that. And last year we had 5 firefighters last year that were got their 5-year awards, as well as we had one gentleman, Glenn McKee, with 35 years of service. So that's a dedication of 553 years. So I'm quite impressed, and I think we should all be impressed. And our public engagement in the community is very strong with ITFD. We did 25 events last year, and the breakfast, we did have one of the firefighters go to the school, reads a book, which she does every year, to one of the classes. So, and then we've done McDonald's, Tim Hortons, different businesses, as well as some of the functions at Jordan Bluffs and the fireworks in Annan and Bognor. So they're quite involved that way. And we do a couple of demonstrations every year, which is showing our tools and everything. So we do with the Abate, which is a bike group that's for educating the public on bike safety. So we did that with them again this year, or last year. We'll be doing it again this year. And then a Harvest for Hunger event, which is in Sydenham for with the park as host, and that was a high angle demonstration, as well as some of our specialized equipment for AutoX. So both of them did AutoX. So other than that, just a bit of quick breakdown. If you saw the calls, I kind of wanted to highlight the breakdowns for you. So Georgian Bluffs was 184, 89 in Meaford last year is 31 MTO calls. Those are cost recovery based. So we invoice the MTO for that, so that's where we get some money back there. The air unit was out 5 times last year, the Grey County air unit, and then automatic aid and mutual aid for 6 and 2. So that's kind of a quick one.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And the next item is the Q1 report. So the recommendation that Township Board of Management receive report ITFD 2025-05 for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Grant and Will. And back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, with the first quarter, we're down 11 calls the first quarter over last year, which is a significant decline, but that's a good thing. If we're down a little bit, it's better for the public, better for us. Just a quick breakdown of the calls is out of the 75 we had, we've got 54 in Georgian Bluffs, 12 in Meaford, 5 in the MTO, 1 for the air light unit, and then automatic aid for 2 and mutual aid for 1. So that's just a thing. And then with their public relation events, I did we did Tim Hortons for the grand reopening, and then we also did, which I did not get in here, but we did the February polar bear plunge out in Shallow Lake, and fundraising hockey game, that money went to Special Olympics for that day. So that's just kind of a quick overview of the first quarter.
Thank you. Any,
If I may, Jeff, and I'm not being critical, it's a good report, but we're down some calls over last year.
Yeah.
My question is due to the weather that we've had this winter, what are those calls? Were they fire calls? Were they motor vehicle accidents? Where was the reduction?
So
Was it traveling habits? What was the?
I would say like there's not as many people on the roads. Like I was shocked how the MVCs were down compared to other years. Usually we're getting lots. I would say the trend is the MVCs from the previous year.
anyone else for, Shirley, go ahead.
And if I may, just curious to know, during the ice storm, was there an impact on calls during that particular weekend?
With us, Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, we had 3 calls during that, the ice storm. They were all back to back, but that's all we were engaged through that ice storm through the fire service.
Anyone else? Will?
I'm just gonna say through you, Chair, we've been looking at previously on the one and then here for automatic aid and mutual aid. And there was talk beforehand about involvement or kind of streamlining them through a master plan. Can you just bring before the board, who do we have automatic aid agreements with and also mutual aid agreements? And how do they relate to your responding to calls with ITFD?
So with automatic aid, that's an agreement between each. We have agreements with Meaford as well as Chatsworth for a catchment area. So for structure fires only, excuse me, we do have an area that we do respond. Both departments are called automatically for structure fires only at this time. So that catchment area starts. So if you want an idea where, it's Gray Road 18 at Rockford to Gray Road 40 on the other side is the catchment area for automatic aid between the 2 departments. So anything in that area on our side as a structure fire, we would respond with our contingent on the Georgian Bluff side. So that'd be a group page, all firefighters and apparatus. If we get onto the Chatsworth side, then we just send a truck and manpower to assist with that. So it'd be a pumper, tanker, and manpower. And if you go to the Meaford side, it comes up to concession 2, right in? Concession 2, and then we go right to Gray Road 112, so the base, that's kind of that catchment area. So that's anything in there for structured fires is considered automatic aid. Anything outside those areas, which mutual aid is a provincial plan. So technically, if we wanted to, we can go anywhere in Ontario under mutual aid to respond. So that's how that automatic aid works for that south end. And then we do have an automatic aid agreement with Wyerton. They're first in for all the day-to-day stuff. We only respond under automatic aid to there if it's a structured fire or any long, prolonged calls or a rescue that they need help with, then we'll go up to do it at that end. But they do the full gamut up there. They do the day-to-day stuff, and we only come in under the automatic aid agreement. Or it's considered, we'd be called in under automatic aid to that portion. That's the North Cap. Does that answer it all?
On that part, also between the two, there's costs associated with running these calls. Can you just clarify to the board when it is automatic aid and mutual aid, like what's the difference when it comes to costing, or is there any?
The automatic aid, there's no fee. It's an agreement for we'll help them if they help us. So that's under automatic aid. Under mutual aid, we can't charge. It's not, we don't bill for mutual aid, but the agreement is no fee. So we do that with Meaford as well. There's no fee in the automatic aid area. It's just the automatic aid gets us responding quicker as a group, so that in that catchment area, they page both departments and we both go. If we're not needed, then they'll stand us down.
I think Sam has a comment on that one as well.
I just want to add something. The agreement that Georgian Bluffs has with South Peninsula does have a fee associated with it, but that is a cost of Georgian Bluffs. It is not a cost at all of TFD.
And that in effect is we are paying Town of South Bruce Peninsula for fire services in that area. Yes. That answer your question then, Will?
I'm good with that. Yes.
Anyone else? Sure.
Chair Carlton, I'm just curious, you mentioned, Jeff, the boundaries, and I wondered if those are anything that will be reviewed during the fire master plan process. I mean, recognizing the growth we've got and the additional traffic that's coming into both Georgian Bluffs and Meaford now, I'm just wondering if, how those boundaries were set, and if they will be, you're nodding, they will be reviewed during this process.
Yeah, so through you, Chair Carlton, yes, they will be reviewed. I don't know whether they'll be changed at all, but they definitely will be reviewed. So one of the processes we actually started this week was we're looking at the response time areas from various different fire halls, ITFD fire hall, Owen Sound, Meaford, Chatsworth, Aaron Eldersley, South Bruce, just to try and work out where the coverage is, where the coverage overlaps are, and where we may be sparse in coverage. And so there is opportunity to review all of those agreements through this process. The other process that we need to look at is looking at the skill sets that we require through the community risk assessment and making sure that we have access to those skill sets. And that's where we might be looking at, as the Chief mentioned, sometimes your mutual aid agreements can extend very, very long distances. It might not necessarily be somebody that's very local. There may be such a few number of particular types of incident, you need to rely on a skill set which perhaps only 2 or 3 departments have in Ontario. And so we'll be highlighting any areas where we'll be looking at mutual aid which may not be sourced locally. So they will be highlighted in the Fire Master Plan, yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing no one, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And we are now moving on to our financial update. The recommendation being that staff report COR 2025-19 be received for information and that any 2024 operating deficit be funded from future capital reserve. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Rick and Grant, and I will turn it over to Samantha.
Thank you, and through you. So when we had met in January, staff did highlight that we were anticipating a 2024 deficit to occur. We have since worked through our year-end numbers and provided those to MNP, and they have been on site and performed the year-end audit, that we are anticipating that deficit to be approximately $43,600. A large part of that is around budget differences in administration and volunteers for fire calls. Are there any questions on 2024 numbers before I proceed to look at 2025 Q1?
Any questions?
It's not a question, and I'm not sure how to frame the conversation, but I do want to reiterate, because I think in January, we as a board talked about, we've had too many deficits in the last 5 years. We're hoping in 2025, we don't see a deficit and we don't have the same conversation. I just thought when I was reading this that needed to come back out and show that I think the board is serious about that. There's got to be a way to manage this so that we don't continue having 7, 8 years of deficits. That's not good budgeting.
I completely agree, and the fire chief and I are regularly meeting to review. And it's right now at a monthly basis, and if we need to increase it for any reasons, we will, to keep an eye on that and ensure that throughout 2025 we are not in the same boat presenting similar financial numbers to the board.
Steve, did I hear you? Did you have a question?
You asked about 24 numbers, and I don't have any on 24 numbers.
So I will continue with 2025 numbers then.
Okay.
Looking at 2025, we have done an implied Q1 budget, which is simply taking the total annual budget for 2025 and dividing it by 4. When looking at actuals, we do recognize that there are timing differences around when actuals may occur compared to budget. So we do look as though we are under on many, that when we are projecting them out is not the case. However, these numbers here are based on set time and date. that. Administration, right now, we are slightly looking under, and again, that is due to the timing of management salaries and benefits specifically on when the budget expenditure is expected to occur compared to when it is actually physically paid to an employee. Same with volunteers. Those fire calls that occurred in March of 2025 aren't paid until April of 2025. So the actuals are reflective of only 2 months really of fire calls, not the 3 months that are within budget numbers. For communications, we have paid the full year annual amount for our Owen Sound Police Dispatchment Agreement. So that is part of what is driving the overage, the implied overage on that. We do anticipate to be within budget come the end of the year. Staff safety, right now we are currently under, as we are trying to ensure that we are monitoring that, and this is one that we do have a lot of control over the spending, and we will only be utilizing as in if needed. So the fire hall, right now we are over our implied Q1 budget as we've paid for a full year's worth of insurance premiums, but the budget is reflective of only 1/4 of that. And capital, 2025 capital had not occurred yet, as many of those recommendations were being presented to the board today. On the revenue side, similar to the timing of volunteer calls, we have similar timing around NTO fire calls. That calls that occurred in March, the revenue would not be recognized or posted until April. So the revenue for NTO is in essence 2 months, being January and February. At the time of pulling this report, we had not invoiced the, I apologize, we had invoiced the capital. So the capital is reflective of the full year budget amount, not just the 1/4. And the operating amount is reflective of both Q1 and Q2 revenue. So half the years, whereas the budget implies only 1/4.
Any questions on these numbers?
Thank you. She explained most of it. It's just we're talking 30% over on expenditures and 50% over on at the end of the day. Is there any reason for concern here, or should it all work out with timing?
Through you, I believe it will work out with timing. As mentioned before, the fire chief and I are regularly meeting to review these.
I won't panic today.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Rick.
Thank you. You're nothing specific about the numbers here, but you mentioned dispatch. And just listening to the local media, there are local municipalities that have changed dispatch services for savings. When does our dispatch contract come up for renewal?
For you, Chair, Carlton, it's not often I'm the one that's able to lay my hands on it, but I dug that out just this morning as part of the fire master plan. So our fire dispatch agreement is signed in 2021. To effect in 2021. I can't find an end date to it.
Would it be logical to think a 5-year agreement, so we'd be looking at 2026?
5 years would be similar to many others, so yes. I believe that we are in actually, yeah, so it expires at the end of this year, December 31st, 2025.
It's a good thing we discussed it.
It is. I will take an action away from today.
Any further? Really?
For Carlton, I'd like to ask, on page 4, under miscellaneous, I just wondered about some clarification. It says include reimbursements from the Grey County Fire Chiefs for usage of the air light vehicle. First of all, I'm not sure what an air light vehicle is. And how does that process work? Who owns the vehicle and is it shared amongst how many fire departments?
So the Grey County Air Light truck is owned by the Grey County Fire Chiefs. And when it's used, it's invoiced through ITFD. So I invoice the departments, they send the checks to ITFD and for our expenses.
So through you check out, so the airlight truck, I have the same question. It's a truck, and on the back of it has a compressor, and it's used for filling up the air tanks that firefighters use. As the chief says, it's shared across all the Grey County fire services. It resides at ITFD, and ITFD staff it. And when it gets called by one of the others, we charge the timer. ITFD charges the timer. So it's an expense of ITFD and a revenue back into ITFD to cover the costs of the truck. It is not owned by ITFD.
Jointly owned by all departments. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. We have no unfinished business, no new business. Board inquiries and comments. Does any member have an inquiry of the fire chief?
I got just a question.
Go ahead, Lon.
On the hiring process, do you hire or will someone do it for you?
We work with HR, from Georgia Bluffs HR. It's Andy and I that do the hiring with the assistance of HR. So the applications are done through HR here. They apply here, then we interview. We have 2 sets of interviews and a physical fitness test, and then selected off of scoring. We do score them. So they were scored, and then we hire from that pool.
And who has the final say on whether you believe they could be a firefighter or not?
Well, that's the discussion Andy and I have together. We work together to come to that agreement. And I think we've done fairly well working together towards this, is getting the proper people. So we've had some pretty good discussions and heartfelt discussions, and it always works out at the end of the day. So we always seem to agree and work that. So it's Andy and I just, at the end of the day, have the say.
That's the question I just had in
Yep.
my mind. I wanted to find it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No, and you've just had a successful recruit and you've just offered some
Yeah,
of these positions, I would
Yeah,
say.
so we've got, at this time, we have 5 letters out, no confirmations yet. So at the next meeting, we'll have the names and the numbers. So until the letters are signed, we don't have those hired yet. So.
And does 5 bring us up to the complement where we hope to be or should be?
No, we're still down. We're gonna have to do another, probably later in the fall or into next year. We're still just figuring out, we're gonna be down still 3, I'm thinking, Andy. Yeah, we're still gonna be down 3.
Could be.
Could be down 3, depending on,
What happens with the 5?
yeah, with the 5.
Understand.
And then we're gonna have to do another application process and do the whole thing again.
Just to add to that question, do you ask the applicant on their availability when they can respond? Like I see in reports we've had in the past that you or your deputy have to run a lot of calls. Would that not be better to try and get people who can, say, respond weekdays?
Yeah, we've we've closed that gap for the on-call that Andy and I were doing to fill in those gaps that we had. So we filled those gaps in. We do have a good contingent of a driver pool now for the on-call stuff at night. Through the day, it's Andy and I go to the, like, if whoever's on can go to those calls, depending on the type of call. But at this time, Andy and I still run the daytime calls.
But you're not
For our-
running
for our
as,
shift, so for my 10 hours, when I'm in, I'll run calls. Other than that, I don't run calls.
but you're running the calls as the chief and not just as a firefighter.
As a chief.
If I'm understanding it, though, it's because during those daytime hours when you are working, there's less availability of the volunteers? Is that the rationale there?
Yeah, and that, and the distance for travel to get the apparatus too, when people are so far out, it's to get if we get the trucks out in a quicker time. If no one's really close to the core where we are to respond and get the vehicles. So that's kind of the way we've ran it.
Shirley, go ahead.
If I may, Chair Carlton, with your indulgence, I wanted to share something that happened at the recent Good Roads Conference. Councillor Harley Greenfield from Meaford and Jeff Rees and myself were attending a dinner when the host of the dinner choked on a piece of steak. And Jeff immediately jumped up to his aid and attempted to do the Heimlich maneuver. That was not successful, and the gentleman could not breathe and collapsed to the floor. And Jeff immediately, shirt open, started doing CPR. The gentleman was down for almost 4 minutes, and Jeff brought him back. Another person who was there at the dinner used his finger to try to dislodge the food. The paramedics and fire department came, but by that time Jeff had the individual breathing again, had him stable, had him talking before the firemen and the paramedics arrived. So it was a really tense moment, but I just can't speak enough to the training and to and Jeff just jumped right up out of his chair, didn't think twice, knew exactly what to do, was not, distracted by anything that was going on around him, the moving of tables and people crying and servers coming to see what was going on and so forth. He just did what needed to be done, and he saved a life in front of all of us. It was incredible, and we've been locally calling him a hero. So as a member of your department, I wanted you to hear from a witness of that event how spectacular it was and how proud we are of Jeff for just jumping right into action. So thank you for allowing me to share that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Kudos to Jeff for doing that and the training involved to get there.
Absolutely, there was no hesitation.
Very good. Okay. We have no closed session. The board will meet again as regularly scheduled on July 15th at 2 p.m. And the next recommendation is that the meeting be adjourned at 2:54 p.m. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Grant, Will, all in favor? It's carried. Thank you.